The boy smiled at another man and called him Dad, and that was the moment billionaire CEO Damien Blackwood realized he had destroyed his own family with his bare hands. The winter sunlight poured through the glass ceiling of St. Augustine Academy, painting golden reflections across the polished marble floor as parents filled the hallway with laughter and expensive perfume. Damien adjusted the cuff of his charcoal Italian suit, while cameras flashed around him. 2 years ago, his face had appeared on the cover of every major business magazine in America. Now the same media outlets called him the most spectacular corporate collapse of the decade. Blackwood Technologies had lost nearly $400 million in 12 months. Investors were leaving. Board members were panicking. And yet none of that prepared him for what he was about to see. A little boy around 6 years old sprinted through the crowded hallway wearing a Navy school uniform and bright white sneakers. "Dad!" the child shouted with pure excitement before throwing himself into the arms of a tall man standing near the grand staircase. Damien froze instantly. His heartbeat stumbled so hard it physically hurt. The child looked exactly like him. The same dark hair. The same gray eyes. Even the tiny dimple on the left cheek was identical. But the man kneeling down to hug the boy was not Damien Blackwood. It was Alexander Knight. Billionaire investor. Philanthropist. And the one rival Damien had spent years trying to destroy. "Easy there, buddy." Alexander laughed warmly as he steadied the child in his arms. "You almost knocked me over." Then another child appeared beside them. A little girl this time. Matching eyes. Matching smile. Matching features Damien recognized with terrifying clarity. Twins. His twins. The air inside the hallway suddenly felt too thin to breathe. Conversations blurred into static noise around him as memories crashed violently through his mind. Evelyn crying quietly beside a hospital bed. Divorce papers sliding across a polished conference table. A phone call he ignored because Sophia wanted to fly to Milan for Fashion Week. God. Damien swallowed hard as realization settled into his chest like concrete. Those children were his. "Dad, look!" The little girl giggled while showing Alexander a gold star sticker from class. Alexander smiled with the kind of patience Damien barely recognized anymore. "That's amazing, sweetheart." Sweetheart. The word cut deeper than any insult ever could. Because Alexander sounded natural saying it. Comfortable. Like he had spent years earning the title Damien threw away in a single selfish season of his life. Then Damien saw her. Evelyn Carter stepped into a hallway wearing a cream-colored wool coat over an elegant black dress, her blonde hair falling softly over one shoulder. 6 years earlier she had walked into his office carrying coffee and blueprints while helping him build Blackwood Technologies from a rented garage. Back then she believed in him more than he believed in himself. Now she looked untouchable. Calm. Radiant. Wealthy in a way that had nothing to do with money. Alexander reached for her hand automatically, and she smiled at him with genuine peace Damien had never managed to give her. The twins moved between them naturally, like pieces of a family Damien no longer belonged to. Then the little boy looked up at Alexander and said the sentence that shattered whatever remained of Damien Blackwood's pride. "Dad, can we show Mom the picture we drew together?" Damien felt every conversation in the hallway fading into silence around him as the twins ran past his legs holding colorful drawings in their tiny hands. The little girl laughed while Alexander crouched beside her, carefully straightening the paper so he could admire every crayon detail like it belonged in an art gallery instead of a first-grade classroom. "That is definitely going on the refrigerator," Alexander said warmly. "Front and center." Evelyn smiled softly beside him, and for one painful second Damien remembered a different refrigerator in a tiny apartment over a mechanic's shop in Brooklyn 6 years ago. Back then Evelyn used to tape his handwritten business goals beside grocery lists because they could not afford a whiteboard. She believed Blackwood Technologies would become a billion-dollar company long before anyone else did. She worked 18-hour days beside him while carrying coffee, organizing contracts, answering investor calls, and sleeping on office couches during product launches. She believed in him so completely it terrified him sometimes. And somehow he still lost her. "Mr. Blackwood?" A nervous voice pulled Damien back into the present. One of the Academy board members approached carefully with a forced smile. "We are honored you attended the donor event today." Damien barely heard him. His eyes remained locked on the family standing 30 feet away. Family? God, that word burned now. Because the twins looked at Alexander with absolute trust. Natural trust. The kind children only give to someone who showed up every single day. Damien suddenly realized something even worse than losing Evelyn. He had missed everything. First words. First steps. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. School recitals. Nightmares. Fevers. Every moment that turned strangers into family had happened without him. "Excuse me," Damien muttered before walking through the crowded hallway toward Evelyn. Her expression changed the moment she noticed him approaching. The warmth disappeared from her eyes instantly, replaced by calm caution. Not fear. That hurt most of all. Evelyn Carter no longer feared him enough to hate him emotionally. She had simply moved beyond him. Alexander slowly stood beside her, one protective hand resting lightly against the little boy's shoulder. Damien stopped a few feet away. Close enough to hear the twins breathing. Close enough to notice the tiny freckles across the girl's nose looked exactly like his mother's. "Evelyn," he said quietly, his voice rougher than intended. The twins looked up curiously. The little boy tilted his head. "Mom, who is he?" "Mom." The word echoed through Damien's chest like shattered glass. Evelyn took a slow breath before answering carefully. "An old business associate." Damien physically flinched. Not husband. Not father. Not even Damien. Just an old business associate. Alexander studied him silently, his blue eyes impossible to read. Damien had hated that expression for years. Alexander Knight always looked calm, even while destroying competitors in billion-dollar negotiations. But now Damien finally understood why Alexander won so often. Men who stayed calm controlled the room. And right now Damien was losing control of himself completely. "They are mine," Damien whispered, looking directly at Evelyn. "I know they are." The twins exchanged confused glances while Evelyn's face remained unreadable. "Biology is not the same thing as fatherhood," she replied softly. Damien swallowed hard. Every word felt deserved. That somehow made it worse. "I did not know where you went after the divorce," he admitted. "I looked for you." Evelyn gave a faint smile filled with disbelief. "You looked for me after the tabloids started calling Sophia your future wife." The name landed like poison. Sophia Vale. The model who once stood beside Damien at red carpet events while Evelyn sat alone in a hospital room carrying twins. Damien closed his eyes briefly. 6 years ago he convinced himself success required sacrifice. Investors wanted glamour, luxury, perfection. Sophia represented the image his company needed. Evelyn represented the life he came from. Ordinary, loyal, real. And Damien chose image over love. "Dad, are we late for lunch?" the little girl asked Alexander innocently. "Dad." Again that word. Alexander smiled gently at her. "Not yet, sweetheart." Then his eyes lifted toward Damien for the first time since the conversation began. "Children remember who stays," Alexander said calmly. "Even when they are too young to understand why someone left." Damien could not answer. Because deep down, beneath the ruined empire and collapsing ego and expensive suit, he finally understood something horrifying. Alexander Knight had not stolen his family. Damien Blackwood had abandoned them himself. The silence between the four adults stretched so tightly that even the distant sound of children laughing across the academy courtyard felt painfully loud. Damien watched his son grip Alexander's hand with complete trust while his daughter leaned comfortably against Evelyn's side, and for the first time in years the billionaire businessman who once dominated boardrooms across Manhattan had absolutely no idea what to say next. A camera flash suddenly exploded from the end of the hallway. Then another. Parents nearby began whispering as several reporters standing near the donor event entrance recognized the growing tension. Damien's stomach tightened instantly. Of course the media was here. St. Augustine Academy educated the children of senators, celebrities, and billionaires. Gossip traveled through these marble halls faster than stock market crashes. Mr. Blackwood, one reporter called carefully while raising a camera. Is it true those children are your heirs? Evelyn's expression darkened immediately. Alexander stepped slightly forward without raising his voice or changing his calm expression. This is a private family moment, he said evenly. The authority in his tone worked instantly. The reporters hesitated. Damien remembered hating that about Alexander too. He never needed to shout to control a room. Meanwhile, Damien spent years forcing people to listen through power, money, and intimidation. Please, Damien said quietly to Evelyn, almost desperate now. Can we talk somewhere private? Evelyn looked at him for several long seconds before finally nodding once. 5 minutes. Alexander glanced at her carefully. Are you sure? The softness in his voice nearly destroyed Damien emotionally because 6 years ago Evelyn used to look at him with that same quiet trust. I am fine, she answered gently. Fine. Another painful word. Because she truly was fine now. Better than fine. She had survived him. The twins followed a teacher toward the courtyard while Alexander remained nearby, close enough to protect Evelyn if necessary but respectful enough to give her space. Damien noticed the detail immediately. Alexander never controlled her. He supported her. God! How had Damien spent years misunderstanding the difference? Evelyn led him into a quiet sitting lounge overlooking the academy gardens. Snow drifted softly outside the giant windows while a piano version of Moon River played through hidden speakers overhead. The room smelled faintly of coffee and cedarwood. 6 years ago Damien would have admired how luxurious the academy looked. Today it only reminded him of everything he could no longer buy back. Evelyn remained standing near the fireplace while Damien struggled to meet her eyes. You look healthy, he said finally, hating how weak the sentence sounded. Evelyn gave a small nod. Life became peaceful after I stopped begging people to love me correctly. The words landed softly but hit harder than anger ever could. Damien stared down at his wedding ringless hand. I deserve that. Yes, Evelyn answered calmly. No hesitation. No cruelty. Just truth. Damien exhaled shakily. I thought about you constantly after the divorce. Evelyn almost laughed at that. While vacationing with Sophia on yachts? He flinched again. Sophia. The relationship that once looked glamorous across magazine covers had collapsed publicly 2 years earlier after leaked financial scandals and cheating rumors destroyed both their reputations. Sophia left him during the worst months of Blackwood Technology's downfall. At the time, Damien convinced himself her betrayal hurt. Now, standing in front of Evelyn again, he realized Sophia leaving had merely bruised his ego. Losing Evelyn destroyed something much deeper. I was stupid, Damien admitted quietly. I confused image with happiness. Evelyn folded her arms gently across her chest. No. You confused admiration with love. Sophia admired your money. I loved you when your office ceiling leaked every time it rained. Damien closed his eyes. The memory hit instantly. Brooklyn. 28 years old. Cheap coffee. Folding tables. Evelyn laughing while holding an umbrella over his laptop because they could not afford repairs. She stayed through every failure. Every rejection. Every impossible month. And when success finally arrived, Damien replaced her with someone prettier for magazine covers. Why Alexander? Damien whispered painfully. Evelyn looked through the snowy window toward the courtyard where the twins were laughing beside Alexander near an enormous Christmas tree. Her expression softened instantly. Because he never made me feel difficult to love. The answer crushed him completely. Then Evelyn reached into her designer handbag slowly and pulled out something folded carefully with age. A hospital bill. Damien recognized it immediately. Memorial Presbyterian Hospital. 6 years ago. The night the twins were born. Do you know what this is? She asked quietly. Damien stared at the paper without breathing. No. Evelyn's eyes finally met his directly. It is the unpaid emergency room balance from the night your children entered this world while you attended a fashion gala with Sophia in Los Angeles. The room went completely silent. Damien stared at the hospital bill in Evelyn's hand as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. The paper was slightly creased from age, the corners softened from being folded and unfolded too many times over 6 years. But he recognized the date immediately. December 17th. The night snowstorms shut down half of Manhattan. The night Sophia dragged him across a red carpet in Los Angeles while reporters photographed them smiling beneath flashing cameras. The same night Evelyn gave birth alone. His throat tightened so hard he could barely speak. I never saw this, he whispered. Evelyn looked at him quietly. Exactly. The piano music drifting through the Academy lounge suddenly sounded unbearably sad. Damien remembered that entire week with brutal clarity now. Sophia had insisted the gala was essential for Blackwood Technology's public image. Investors loved glamorous couples. Fashion magazines boosted engagement numbers. Every publicist around him claimed Evelyn's pregnancy made the company appear old-fashioned and domestic instead of elite. God. Even remembering those conversations made him sick now. You know what hurts the most? Evelyn asked softly. It was not the cheating. Damien slowly lifted his eyes toward her. It was the moment I realized I had become inconvenient to your success. The sentence shattered through him because it was true. He remembered asking her not to attend investor dinners because maternity dresses did not fit the luxury branding strategy. He remembered moving her out of interviews. Removing family photos from his office before magazine shoots. Tiny decisions at the time. Strategic decisions. Except now, 6 years later, they sounded monstrous inside his own head. Evelyn carefully unfolded the bill and placed it onto the small coffee table between them. The hospital called me 3 times while I was holding newborn twins. Her voice remained calm, but Damien noticed a slight tremble in her fingers for the first time. I had $43 in my checking account. Damien felt physically ill. $43. 6 years ago he owned 2 penthouses, a private jet membership, and a watch collection worth more than most homes in America. Meanwhile, the mother of his children sat in a hospital room counting grocery money. Why did you not call me? He asked weakly. Evelyn almost smiled at that. I did. Damien's entire body went still. What? 3 times. She pulled out her phone calmly and opened an old screenshot preserved inside a hidden album. Missed calls. Damien Blackwood. December 17th. 2:14 a.m. 2:39 a.m. 3:02 a.m. Beneath the missed calls sat a single unread text message. The twins are coming. I am scared. Please answer me. Damien felt the blood drain from his face completely. He remembered that night now. The flashing lights. Champagne towers. Sophia posing beside him in silver silk while his phone vibrated repeatedly in his jacket pocket. He silenced it without checking because a photographer from Forbes was taking pictures. Jesus Christ. He slowly sat down like his knees could no longer hold his weight. I did not know, he whispered. Evelyn's eyes softened slightly, but not with forgiveness. More like pity. That became your favorite sentence for a while. Damien covered his face with one shaking hand. Somewhere outside the lounge windows, children laughed while snow continued falling gently across the Academy courtyard. The contrast nearly destroyed him emotionally. Life had continued beautifully for everyone else while he drowned in consequences he pretended not to notice. Alexander paid the bill, Evelyn said quietly after a long silence. Damien looked up immediately. What? He walked into my hospital room carrying coffee and teddy bears 3 hours after the twins were born. Evelyn smiled faintly at the memory despite herself. At first I thought he came to mock me because you spent years trying to ruin his company. Damien swallowed hard. Yes. He had. Alexander Knight had been his biggest rival in tech acquisitions for nearly a decade. Damien sabotaged partnerships. Stole investors. humiliated him publicly during interviews. But Alexander still showed up for Evelyn when Damien did not. Why would he help me? Damien asked bitterly, already knowing the answer would hurt. Evelyn looked toward the snowy courtyard again where Alexander now helped the twins zip their winter coats before recess. Because I'm like you, she said softly. He never treated kindness like weakness. Damien watched through the glass as his son laughed, while Alexander lifted him effortlessly into the air. Pure joy. Natural love. A father's instinct. And suddenly Damien realized something unbearable. The twins had probably never cried themselves to sleep wondering where their father was. Because Alexander Knight made sure they never had to. Damien could not stop staring through the lounge window as Alexander knelt in the snow helping Emma zip up her tiny red winter coat, while Ethan proudly showed off a paper snowflake he had made in class. The twins glowed around him naturally, effortlessly, like sunlight finding warmth. Damien remembered once believing fatherhood was something measured through money. Private schools. Luxury homes. Trust funds. He had spent years convincing himself that success alone made a man valuable. But standing there now, watching another man wipe melted snowflakes from his daughter's cheek with gentle patience, Damien realized children remembered moments, not bank accounts. The first word Ethan ever said was not mama, Evelyn said quietly behind him. Damien turned slowly toward her. She remained seated near the fireplace now, her hands folded carefully in her lap as soft amber light flickered across her face. It was Dad! The word hit him harder this time because he already knew who the child meant. Evelyn smiled sadly at the memory. Alexander cried in the kitchen after hearing it. Damien looked away immediately, shame crawling through him like ice water. I would have been there if I knew. Evelyn shook her head softly. No, Damien. You would have sent flowers. Silence filled the room again. Heavy silence. The kind that exposed truths nobody could hide from anymore. Damien lowered himself into the leather chair opposite her, exhaustion finally visible across his face. For years he had hidden every weakness behind tailored suits and rehearsed confidence. But today he looked like a man collapsing under the weight of his own choices. Was it serious between you and Alexander from the beginning? He asked quietly. Evelyn gave a faint laugh under her breath. Honestly? I hated him at first. Damien blinked in surprise. You hated Alexander Knight? He walked into my hospital room wearing a $12,000 coat and carrying organic coffee from some place in Manhattan I could not pronounce. For the first time all afternoon, a small genuine smile touched her face. I thought he came to pity me. Damien listened carefully while the snow continued falling outside the academy windows in slow white waves. But he sat beside my hospital bed for 6 straight hours, Evelyn continued softly. Not because he wanted anything from me. Not because he expected gratitude. He just stayed. Damien swallowed hard. Staying. Such a simple thing. Yet somehow the one thing he failed to do. Do you know what he brought me the next morning? Evelyn asked. Damien shook his head slowly. A notebook. Her eyes drifted toward the courtyard again. Not flowers. Not jewelry. A notebook. Damien frowned slightly. Evelyn reached into her purse and carefully removed an old black leather notebook worn gently at the edges. Because he overheard me telling a nurse I wanted to work again someday, but could not afford childcare. She handed it to Damien. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the cover. Inside were pages filled with business plans, marketing ideas, budget calculations, product sketches. His chest tightened instantly because he recognized the handwriting. Evelyn's handwriting. Alexander told me to build something that belonged to me this time, she whispered. Not another man's empire. Damien slowly turned the pages while memories flooded back painfully. Evelyn sitting beside him years ago helping draft the original Blackwood Technologies pitch deck. Evelyn correcting his presentations at 2 in the morning. Evelyn sacrificing promotions and opportunities to help him succeed first. And he rewarded that loyalty by replacing her publicly once prettier headlines became available. You built Night Living from this? Damien asked hoarsely. Evelyn nodded once. Night Living. The luxury wellness company now worth nearly $900 million. Investors called it the most trusted family lifestyle brand in America. Damien remembered mocking the company years ago because it focused on emotional wellness instead of aggressive expansion. Meanwhile, Blackwood Technologies chased endless acquisitions until everything collapsed under greed and lawsuits. Alexander funded the first warehouse, Evelyn admitted. But every product idea came from me. Damien looked at her differently for the first time in years. Not as the woman he left behind. Not as the mother of his children. But as someone brilliant he completely underestimated. God. He spent years believing Evelyn needed him financially when in reality she had helped build every success he ever claimed as his own. You know what the cruelest part is? Damien whispered painfully. Evelyn remained silent. Damien stared down at the notebook resting in his hands. I thought I was choosing a better future when I left you. Evelyn's expression softened slightly. No, she answered quietly. You chose the louder future. Not the better one. Outside the window, Ethan suddenly slipped in the snow while running toward Alexander. Damien instinctively stood halfway from his chair in alarm. But before panic could fully rise, Alexander laughed warmly and scooped the little boy safely into his arms while Emma giggled beside them. The twins looked completely secure. Completely loved. Damien slowly sat back down again as a devastating realization settled into his chest. His children had grown up protected from the very emptiness he created because another man stepped into the space he abandoned. The academy bell rang softly across the courtyard as children began lining up for afternoon activities, but Damien remained frozen in the leather chair holding Evelyn's old notebook like evidence from a trial he had already lost. Every page smelled faintly of coffee and paper and long nights of sacrifice. He remembered those nights now with brutal clarity. Evelyn sitting cross-legged on cheap apartment carpet while balancing spreadsheets on her knees. Evelyn reheating instant noodles at 2 in the morning because either of them could afford delivery. Evelyn telling him over and over that one day the world would know his name. And somehow, somewhere between private jets and magazine covers, Damien forgot the woman who helped build the road beneath his feet. Do the twins know who I am? He asked quietly without looking up. Evelyn took a slow breath before answering. They know you are their biological father. The word biological sounded clinical. Distant. Like a legal technicality instead of family. Damien's chest tightened painfully. And what do they think about me? Evelyn hesitated for the first time all afternoon. That hesitation terrified him more than anger would have. Ethan asked me once why you never came to his birthday parties, she admitted softly. Damien closed his eyes immediately. What did you tell him? The truth. Her voice remained calm. That some people make mistakes they regret for a very long time. Snow continued drifting outside while parents crossed the courtyard carrying coffee cups and designer handbags. Somewhere nearby a child laughed loudly enough to echo through the marble hallway. Ordinary sounds. Beautiful sounds. Damien suddenly realized how silent his own penthouse had become over the years. No crayons on countertops. No cartoons playing Saturday mornings. No tiny shoes abandoned near staircases. Just endless quiet and expensive furniture nobody touched. Do they hate me? He whispered. Evelyn looked genuinely surprised by the question. No. That answer hit him unexpectedly hard. Children are kinder than adults, she continued softly. They only understand presence. You were either there or you were not. Damien stared toward the snowy courtyard again where Alexander now helped Emma build a tiny snowman beside the fountain, while Ethan proudly searched for sticks to use as arms. The scene looked so natural. It physically hurt to watch. I used to think Alexander hated me, Damien admitted bitterly. Evelyn almost smiled at that. Oh, he definitely hated you. Damien blinked in surprise. Then why did he help me by helping you? Evelyn's expression softened as she watched Alexander laughing with the twins outside. Because he understood something you never did. What? Winning means nothing if you become cruel while doing it. The sentence settled heavily into the room. Damien remembered every ruthless decision he made during those years. Every interview where he mocked competitors publicly. Every employee he overworked. Every investor he manipulated. At the time, Wall Street praised his aggression. Magazines called him fearless. But now his empire was collapsing while Alexander's life looked painfully complete. "Did you love him immediately?" Damien asked quietly. Evelyn looked down at her wedding ring for a moment before answering. "No." Her honesty surprised him again. "I was exhausted. Heartbroken. Angry. I did not trust anyone anymore." She smiled faintly. "But Alexander never rushed me. He never demanded forgiveness for things he did not personally break." Damien swallowed hard. God. He could not even remember the last time he had been patient with anyone. "The twins got sick during their first winter," Evelyn continued softly. "Nothing serious. Just fevers and ear infections." Her eyes glistened slightly at the memory. "Alexander slept on the nursery floor for 3 nights because he was afraid one of them would stop breathing while we slept." Damien looked away instantly as shame flooded his chest again. Another memory stolen from him. Another moment another man carried while Damien attended investor dinners pretending success mattered more than home. "Why are you telling me all this?" he asked quietly. Evelyn studied him carefully across the fireplace glow. "Because for the first time since I met you, you finally look like a man willing to hear the truth instead of defend himself from it." Damien leaned back slowly against the chair as exhaustion settled deep into his face. She was right. 6 years ago he would have argued. Blamed pressure. Blamed business. Blamed Sophia. But none of those excuses survived the sight of his son smiling at another man with absolute love. Suddenly the lounge door opened softly. Alexander stepped inside carrying Emma's tiny pink mitten in one hand while snowflakes melted across the shoulders of his dark wool coat. "Someone lost this," he said warmly before noticing the expression on Damien's face. The room grew quiet instantly. Then Ethan's excited voice echoed from the hallway outside. "Dad! Come see the giant snowman we made!" Damien felt his heart crack all over again as Alexander turned naturally toward the doorway without hesitation because when a child called for him, he answered every single time. Damien watched Alexander leave the lounge without hesitation the moment Ethan called for him, and something inside his chest finally broke in a way money could never repair. The door closed softly behind Alexander, but the echo of that tiny word still lingered in the room like a wound that would never fully heal. Dad. Such a simple word. 2 letters. Yet Damien suddenly understood why it carried more power than every business title he had ever fought to earn. Chief Executive Officer. Founder. Billionaire. Visionary. None of those titles mattered inside a child's heart. "You still have time to become a better man," Evelyn said quietly from across the fireplace. Damien let out a bitter laugh under his breath. "Not a father, though." Evelyn remained silent for several seconds before answering honestly. "I do not know." The truth hurt more because she did not say it cruelly. She said it carefully, like someone protecting children instead of punishing him. Damien rubbed one hand across his face slowly, exhaustion settling deeper into his features by the minute. "I spent 6 years convincing myself you and the twins were happier without me because it made the guilt easier to survive." Evelyn looked at him quietly. "And were you happier without us?" Damien could not answer immediately because the question exposed something ugly and undeniable. No. He had not been happy. Successful sometimes. Distracted constantly. Admired publicly. But never happy. The penthouses felt colder every year. The parties louder. The relationships emptier. Even during the height of his success, he found himself staring at random families in restaurants wondering why they looked more fulfilled sharing burgers at corner booths than he felt standing inside luxury suites overlooking Manhattan skylines. "Sophia left the same way I left you," he admitted finally. Evelyn's expression did not change. "I know." Damien blinked in surprise. "How?" "It was on every entertainment channel in America for 3 weeks. God. Right. The scandal. Sophia Vale walking out of a Beverly Hills hotel beside a younger actor while paparazzi cameras exploded around them. Blackwood Technologies stock dropping another 17% overnight. Damien remembered the humiliation vividly now. But strangely, sitting here with Evelyn again, the betrayal barely mattered anymore. Sophia leaving only exposed the emptiness that already existed inside his life. When she packed her bags, Damien whispered quietly. The apartment stayed silent afterward. He looked toward the snowy courtyard again. Too silent. Evelyn's eyes softened slightly. Children change silence. Damien swallowed hard. I know that now. Outside the lounge windows, Ethan suddenly lifted the giant snowman's stick arm proudly while Emma clapped beside him. Alexander laughed warmly as he adjusted the crooked scarf around the snowman's neck. The image looked painfully perfect against the falling snow and golden academy lights. Damien felt like he was watching the life he should have protected unfolding through glass he could no longer cross. Do they ever ask about me now? He asked carefully. Evelyn nodded once. Sometimes. His heartbeat quickened slightly. What do you tell them? Evelyn leaned back slowly in her chair, considering the answer carefully. I tell them people can love imperfectly and still regret it forever. Damien looked down immediately because he did not deserve even that much grace from her. Alexander wanted to tell them the truth years ago, Evelyn admitted softly. But I stopped him. Damien looked up in surprise again. Why? Evelyn's eyes drifted toward the twins outside. Because children should not carry adult bitterness. God. Even after everything he did, she still protected his image for the sake of the twins. Damien suddenly realized Evelyn had spent 6 years being kinder to him than he ever deserved. I used to think kindness made people weak, he admitted bitterly. Evelyn gave a faint sad smile. That is because powerful people rarely need kindness until they lose everything. The sentence settled into him heavily because it was true. When Blackwood Technologies ruled headlines, Damien believed compassion slowed people down. Empathy looked inefficient from the top of skyscrapers. But now, with lawsuits draining his fortune and loneliness hollowing out his expensive life, kindness suddenly looked like the rarest form of strength in the world. The lounge door opened again softly, and this time both twins burst inside carrying snow-covered gloves and bright red cheeks from the cold. Mom! Emma giggled breathlessly. Dad made the snowman look like Grandpa Knight. Ethan noticed Damien standing near the fireplace and paused curiously. The little boy studied him carefully for several long seconds before walking closer. Damien's entire body tensed without meaning to. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Mom says you knew her a long time ago. Damien could barely breathe. Yes, he answered softly. Ethan looked at him with innocent honesty only children possess. Then why did you stop visiting? The room felt completely silent. Ethan's question hung in the lounge like frozen air. The little boy stood only a few feet away from Damien now, his gray eyes filled with innocent curiosity instead of anger, and somehow that made the moment even harder to survive. Damien opened his mouth once but no words came out. How could he explain 6 years of selfishness to a child who still believed adults were supposed to protect the people they loved? Emma stepped beside her brother quietly, clutching one snow-covered mitten against her chest while studying Damien with the same cautious curiosity. Evelyn remained near the fireplace, tense but calm, while Alexander stood silently by the doorway watching everything unfold with careful attention. No one interrupted. No one rescued Damien from the truth this time. Ethan tilted his head slightly again. Did you move far away? Damien felt his throat tighten painfully. No, he answered softly. The twins exchanged confused glances. Then why did you not come? Emma asked quietly. God. Such simple questions. Questions children could ask in 10 seconds that adults spent entire lifetimes avoiding. Damien lowered himself slowly onto one knee so he would not tower over them. His expensive suit pressed against the polished marble floor, but for once he did not care. Because I made very bad choices, he admitted quietly. Ethan frowned slightly. Like lying? Damien almost stopped breathing. Children always saw straight through complicated excuses. Yes, he whispered. Sometimes lying. Sometimes being selfish. Emma studied him carefully. Mom says selfish people can still become better if they tell the truth. Damien looked toward Evelyn in surprise. She gave the smallest shrug, almost embarrassed by her own kindness now. Your mom is smarter than most people I know, Damien said softly. Ethan nodded proudly. Dad says that too. Dad. Again the word landed gently but painfully. Alexander finally stepped forward then, resting one calm hand on Ethan's shoulder. All right, buddy, he said warmly. Mrs. Harper is waiting for your science projects downstairs. Ethan looked disappointed. But I want to hear the rest. Alexander smiled patiently. Adult conversations usually sound more exciting than they actually are. Emma giggled immediately at that while Evelyn shook her head with a faint smile. The twins slowly headed toward the doorway before Ethan suddenly stopped and turned back toward Damien again. Were you sad when we were born? The question shattered whatever composure Damien still had left. He looked at his son standing there beneath the warm academy lights, snowflakes melting in his dark hair, and realized this child genuinely wanted to understand him. Not judge him. Understand him. Damien's voice nearly broke when he answered. No. He swallowed hard. I was stupid. Silence filled the room again. Ethan seemed to think carefully about that answer before nodding once like he accepted it in the simple way children often do. Okay, he said quietly before taking Emma's hand and leaving with Alexander into the hallway. But just before disappearing around the corner, Damien heard Emma whisper something softly to Alexander. He looks lonely. Alexander glanced back toward the lounge briefly. Not with victory. Not with hatred. Just understanding. Somehow that hurt even more. The door closed gently behind them, leaving Damien and Evelyn alone once again beside the firelight and falling snow outside. Damien stared toward the empty doorway long after the twins disappeared. She is right, he admitted quietly. Evelyn remained silent. I have spent years surrounded by people and still felt completely alone. He laughed bitterly under his breath. Turns out penthouses echo when nobody loves you inside them. Evelyn's expression softened despite herself because she remembered the man Damien used to be before ambition hollowed him out from the inside. Back when he laughed more easily. Back when success felt exciting instead of addictive. You know what the worst part is? Damien asked quietly. I thought losing Blackwood Technologies would destroy me. He looked toward the snowy courtyard again where the giant snowman stood beneath twinkling academy lights. But this hurts more. Evelyn crossed her arms gently, watching him carefully now. Why are you really here today, Damien? The question lingered heavily between them. Damien took a long breath before finally answering honestly for the first time in years. Because yesterday my board voted to remove me as chief executive officer. Evelyn blinked in surprise. What? Damien nodded slowly. Blackwood Technologies officially belongs to the investors now. His voice sounded strangely calm saying it aloud. I spent my entire adult life sacrificing everything to build that company. He looked up at her with exhausted eyes. And when they pushed me out, I realized there was nobody waiting for me at home. Evelyn's face softened slightly again despite all the pain between them. Damien gave a hollow laugh. Funny, right? He whispered bitterly. I traded my family for an empire. Then his eyes drifted toward the hallway, where the twins had disappeared with Alexander. And in the end I lost both. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly inside the academy lounge while snow drifted past the tall windows like slow-moving stars, and Damien sat there staring at the marble floor as if the weight of his entire life had finally become too heavy to carry. 6 years ago he would have blamed everyone else for this moment. The media. Investors. Pressure. Competition. But sitting across from Evelyn now, hearing his son ask why he never came back, stripped every excuse down to the truth he had spent years avoiding. He abandoned the people who loved him most because success felt more exciting than loyalty. And now success was gone too. Evelyn studied him quietly across the room. For the first time since he walked into St. Augustine Academy that morning, Damien no longer looked intimidating. He looked tired. Not physically tired. Soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes after years of chasing things that never actually fill the emptiness inside you. "What happens now?" he asked softly. Evelyn leaned back slowly in her chair, considering the question carefully. "That depends on what you are really asking for." Damien looked toward the hallway where the twins had disappeared minutes earlier. "I do not expect forgiveness." His voice sounded raw now. Honest. "But I would like the chance to stop being a stranger to my own children." Evelyn remained silent for several seconds. "That would take time." "I know. Consistency." "I know. And they come first. Always." Damien nodded immediately. "They should have from the beginning." The words hung heavily between them because both of them knew how much pain it took for him to finally understand something so simple. Suddenly the lounge door opened again and Alexander stepped quietly back inside. Snow still melted across the shoulders of his dark coat while Ethan and Emma laughed somewhere farther down the hallway with their classmates. Damien slowly stood as Alexander approached. For years every conversation between them had carried tension sharp enough to cut glass. Billionaire rivals. Media enemies. Opposites in every headline. But today neither man looked interested in winning anymore. "The twins are getting hot chocolate downstairs," Alexander said calmly before his eyes shifted toward Damien. "They asked if you were staying." Damien blinked in surprise. "They did?" Alexander nodded once. "Children are curious by nature." Silence followed again before Damien finally looked directly at the man he once considered his greatest enemy. "Why did you do it?" he asked quietly. Alexander frowned slightly. "Do what?" Damien swallowed hard. "Raise my children like they were your own." The question lingered heavily in the warm firelight. Alexander glanced briefly toward Evelyn before answering. "Because somebody needed to show them what safety feels like." Damien lowered his eyes immediately. Safety. Another thing he failed to give them. "And because," Alexander continued calmly, "loving them was never difficult." The honesty in that sentence somehow carried no cruelty at all. Only truth. Damien nodded slowly as emotion tightened painfully in his chest again. "Thank you," he whispered. Alexander studied him carefully, almost surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Damien gave a hollow laugh under his breath. "I know I probably do not deserve another chance." "No," Alexander answered honestly. "You probably do not." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly at the tension rising again. But then Alexander's expression softened slightly. "But children deserve the chance to know whether people can change." Damien looked up slowly. "You would allow that?" Alexander glanced toward the hallway where Ethan's laughter echoed again. "That decision belongs to Evelyn." Evelyn stood quietly from her chair then, walking slowly toward the window overlooking the snowy courtyard. Her reflection shimmered softly against the glass beside the falling snow and golden academy lights. 6 years ago she stood alone in a hospital room, terrified and abandoned. Today she stood surrounded by peace she built from the ruins of heartbreak. She turned back toward both men carefully. "The twins deserve honesty," she said softly. "Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just honesty." Damien felt tears burn behind his eyes for the first time in years. He looked away immediately, ashamed of how quickly emotion surfaced now that the walls around him were finally gone. Downstairs, the academy choir suddenly began singing Silent Night as parents gathered near the enormous Christmas tree in the lobby. The music drifted gently through the marble halls while snow continued falling beyond the windows. Evelyn walked toward the doorway slowly before pausing beside Damien for one final moment. "The strange thing about losing everything," she whispered quietly, "is that sometimes it teaches you what actually mattered all along." Then she continued down the hallway toward the twins and Alexander while Damien remained standing alone beside the fading firelight. But for the first time in years, the silence surrounding him no longer felt empty. It felt honest. And somewhere downstairs, his son's laughter echoed through the academy halls while another man held the family Damien once threw away. Some men spend their whole lives building empires only to discover too late that the people waiting at home were the real fortune all along.